London News. Welcome. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Well, we're here now in Melbourne. It's night time, and we're heading across to Dublin to talk to Professor Cahill, a well-known fighter for the rights of every man and woman. So okay, London News here in Melbourne, going to cross over to Ireland. I think you're in Dublin. We're going to welcome Professor Dolores Cahill to Australia. Good morning from here, and it's evening time. Good morning, Professor Cahill, and how are you? And tell us what you've been up to.
Lovely. Thank you for having me on your show, Barry. And of course, to warm hello to everyone in Australia and around the world. What have I been up to? Well, I suppose, Barry, you know that I maybe have been aware of what's going on since my PhD, really, which is about 30 years ago. And then I was learning all about the deceptions that are going on, not just in the area of science and medicine, but in education and media and politics, and particularly in holding people to account and in the law. And actually today is the 2-year anniversary in October, November 2022 of the World Freedom Alliance. So I was very honored to be one of the people organizing the July 2020 rally, defending our freedom in Trafalgar Square, and again in August 2020 with about 10 other people, including Kate Shimarani and many others. So I suppose, and also in May 2020, I was explaining to people in a number of interviews with reference publications that there was prevention and treatment for a flu-like symptom, safest interventions in the world, and that they would try and that for 20 years in the of the studies, half the animals died or all of the animals died. And then I just made the connection that in medicine and in the law, everyone, but particularly doctors and pathologists and coroners and hospitals are required, and regulators and politicians and judges and people we pay as police are required to first do no harm. And the law is just act in honor, do no harm. And if I was reminding them of their oaths and of the law, that if a doctor doesn't give the best prevention and treatment and instead gives a medical that cause or huge harm, that everyone is accountable for their actions and their omissions. No one is above the law. And if you, as a doctor and all the other professions, give an intervention that causes harm, suffering, and death, then it is the man or woman who does the injection that holds the full criminal liability of criminal manslaughter or murder and medical negligence. And they hold all of the liability, both personally and professionally and criminally, and including any indemnity insurance they have. So that's what I was really doing in 2020 and 2021. And then since then, 2021, we now have the end of 2022 in the World Doctors Alliance, the World Freedom Alliance that I'm president of. We have been networking all over the world, really, in order to build the society that we want in the future, where people are held to account and where the deception that has been going on is exposed, and that people, if they do go to a medical professional, that the medical professional has to basically guarantee that they are giving the best medical treatment and that they are upholding the law and their Hippocratic oath and their moral and ethical code to first do no harm.
Yes, it's funny. We'll have to edit this, of course, on YouTube, and anybody watching this now will be able to pop across to Rumble. We won't edit it there, obviously, because we can. Truth obviously doesn't offend people on that platform, which is really nice. So what's happening in Ireland today with politics? How are we going over there? We've got, well, we've got this one world government everywhere, and they've got their muppets they're putting them in every nook and cranny they can in so-called government, which are nothing more than private corporations. So poor old Ireland is it's got a couple of muppets been there for a long time. Are they ever going to leave?
Well, I suppose, this is where we go back to the law, Barry. And I know you've been doing great work in this, as well as many nations have around the world, that whatever role they are in, whether they're politicians or ministers or prime ministers or presidents or attorney generals or people we pay as judges and police, they have to uphold the law themselves. No one is above the law. So, in Ireland, they are clinical trials that have been reported, and we know there's huge underreporting. So for physicians and medical professionals and regulators all around the world, the politicians and everyone that we pay in the government should be stopping what's going on, and they're not. So, and then of course, I know we'll come to it later, but the reason is, why are they not doing it? But we, in the World Freedom Alliance, we sent 40,000 notices of liability in the spring, well, with many people around the world who were volunteering, but to every leaders of the nation and elected politicians, around informing them back in April 2021 of the harm that was being done then. And then I also sent 20 notices of liability in Ireland, including to the regulator and the key politicians and Prime Minister, President and Attorney General, called a notice of liability for harm and death. So I suppose the main issue that we have to really consider is, why are the politicians not looking after the health and the lives of the people in the nation, including those that elected them, which they are not.
Well, I look at all politicians, and I say all, maybe 90% of them, as yet to be convicted criminals. And I was just watching Dublin, there's a hunger strike in Dublin going on at the moment with a few people there. But I saw a piece of that today. There was a pregnant lady there, and sadly she was smoking and she's pregnant, which I found that kind of took a little bit of credence away from her. But I was watching all the people walking past, and I thought, nobody really, the average, I call them the walking dead, they just don't give us stuff anymore. And where are the Michael Collinses and the men of yesterday that had the intestinal fortitude, that's been polite, to help and do something? Have they all gone to ground, or is this protest, which a hunger strike really in one sense is a waste of time? That's my personal opinion, because looking at, nobody really cares, only the people involved. But it's sad to see that Ireland has given up on like Australia. They've given up on the homeless, and of course there's no governments anymore. It's just large corporations, all run and controlled by puppets in the USA. And we got the Walking Dead is a great example of the leader over there, and then we've got our leader here is nothing more than he's obviously very much related, like they probably. Oh, well, I won't say what I was going to say because I'll get banned for life. But anyway, it's a sad situation. Have you got any information on that thing in Dublin, or has it come to your attention?
Yes, it has come to my attention. And obviously, if people are going to that level, they are trying to highlight, in a very poignant way, by sacrificing themselves in order to alert people, we'll say, to what is going on. But of course, I'll just push back a little bit that everyone is innocent until proven guilty as well. So one of the things that, if we are purporting to hold people to account, that we must do, we must have the highest standards. So anyone who would be accused potentially of not upholding the law and doing harm, they are innocent until proven guilty. And then the evidence has to be provided against them. And then they would provide evidence, and they would only then be convicted by a jury trial in their local area. So just to say, we cannot, and I wouldn't really be pronouncing anybody, but of course you are right. We do know that there are key people. Then the second question then is that you're saying what's going on in Ireland. So what's amazing is that from the beginning, I would say maybe 30% or 40% of the Irish population, if not more, were aware from early on what's going on. And what, in a way, is beautiful about these so-called COVID-19 years is that many of us were just studying the law, or in their own way, we'll say parents whose children were had adverse events after a series of injections, that they were researching it on their own. And the beauty really in COVID-19 is that we've all come together now in Ireland. And also in the past few years, we've seen there were many organizations where people were purporting to be true freedom fighters. But actually, we know that the agenda that's going on, many of those people were actually collaborating with the people that were trying to silence us, or to give false information, or to just constantly raise fear, but never actually give practical solutions. So I call them saboteurs. And what's very interesting in the World Freedom Alliance, the World Doctors Alliance, and many of the organizations, we're all connected, Doctors for COVID Ethics and many other organizations around the world, is the language of sabotage and the art of sabotage, and just how you identify saboteurs. So the World Freedom Alliance is 2 years old now, and we're really a decentralized movement in every nation in the world of local people. But because we're on Zoom calls regularly, we can now identify who the true freedom fighters are. And so what we're doing in Ireland, we have, and I'm very honored to be associated with the Irish Republican Brotherhood. And I don't know if you remember, all 7 of the signatories of the 1916 proclamation were members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. And Michael Collins was the president of the IRB and also Minister for Finance. And there was an election in 1918, 1919, and that was a free and fair election. And of course, the members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood had to call themselves Sinn Féin in order to stand for election, because they were being killed. And then they actually, the IRB was set up in the 1850s and are recognized historically and internationally as holding the sovereignty of the nation. And the IRB, the flag that we use, the green, white, and gold, was first used in the funeral of the president of the IRB. So I'm very honored that we have now reinvigorated the IRB with President Billy Maguire. And there's now maybe 30, 40 key people that are essentially building up policies that, in order to prepare for a situation, if it becomes exposed, that exactly as you were saying, the current structures that we have are not lawful and are actually maybe based on deception. So people can find out more information on that at www.IRB Supreme Council.
I'll put that up. Actually, I'll put that up for you.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's what's going on in Ireland, which is amazing. And I'm very honored to be vice president of the IRB, and Billy Maguire is the president. So what we're doing, many aspects, including focusing on things like food and farming, but also on what would a money system look like. And then, of course, there was these amazing Dáil Éireann courts. So Dáil is the parliament in Ireland over 100 years ago, when there was a constitution of the Dáil Éireann courts. And what was amazing is that they were actually very well respected, and they are jury trials. And that is a mechanism. So in the law, a jury trial to hold people to account with a group of 12 of your peers in your local area is a way to restore accountability. And of course, once you restore accountability, then you can actually push back. So the example would be, there was one care home in Ireland where someone went in and injected all 51 of these elderly people. And we did an analysis with Health Freedom Ireland in the previous 3 years on average 2 people died per year. There was no deaths in that care home for the previous 5 weeks. And it was in the newspapers, they got injected on the 21st of January 2021. Within 48 hours, 8 of those elderly people had died. And within 14 days, 2 weeks, 19 of the 51 had died. They had 19 funerals. And within 5 weeks, 26 out of 51 people had died. So if there was a proper rule of law, the local people would have been able to have a jury trial. There would have been a proper investigation into the deaths. And we did the analysis in March, April 2021, and sent it to every member of parliament with Health Freedom Ireland. If there was a jury trial, the statistical correlation was 32 standard deviations. It was absolutely correlated with the date of the injection. And we did the analysis for 9 other care homes, and the deaths were related to the date of the injection. And in none of the care homes were there any deaths in the previous 5 weeks, which was December, January period. So if a jury said the injections were related to the deaths and correlated, then the coroner and the local policeman and the court system would have to contact the regulator and say, you must stop these injections because they are causing more harm than good. And then the clinical trials would have been stopped in Ireland and around the world. So that is the importance of holding people to account. And I think what most of the professions don't know is, under the law, whoever does the injection is accountable. And then things like coroners and regulators and the people who have oversight, the medical councils, the individual men and women in those roles, but particularly the local policeman, the undertaker, the care home owner, they are liable for their actions and omissions under the law. And if they omit to properly highlight that death has been caused and investigate death, they are as guilty as the man or woman who does the injection. And there is no immunity from prosecution under the law. And fraud unravels all if they were not given full and informed consent. And there is no time limit on fraud. So once we then develop a mechanism, because people simply cannot go around killing people.
Yeah.
And then the question for people is to say, why are these trials still going on? That's a major question. But if we hold people to account, we can also hold people to account if they are not giving proper medical information in other diseases, or if they are putting poisonous substances in other areas, such as putting in poisons into the water, like fluoride or arsenic or mercury into the drinking water. They are known to be poisons. So while it is tragic what's going on in the last 2 or 3 years, whether it takes us 2 years, 10 years, or a generation, once we restore accountability under the law and proper jury trials, then many of the aspects that we see that is trying to undermine our sovereignty and accountability will be changed. But again, we do realize it may take 2 years, 10 years, or a generation, but in a generation, people that we pay as medical professionals will not be injecting the most poisonous substance to children, pregnant women, the elderly, and everyone.
Yeah. The humanity, caution, and prudence, the main things of the law, humanity, caution, and prudence. Well, we were in the most lockdown state here in Victoria, and we're having a pseudomonious election coming up this month. And apparently they're going to have the counting is going to be done in Europe for the election. Obviously, Australians in Melbourne especially can't count, so that must be the reason for it. Or should I say, perhaps it's a foregone conclusion who's going to get it in. But looking at Italy, I've seen that the new president, isn't it the president? Yes, is going to restore or give back the jobs to all the people who unlawfully lost them because of these criminal politicians, which are around the world, and they're this large corporation. I mean, really. But the good thing about it is all these despicable people, Hitler and Mussolini, and Daniel Andrews here in Melbourne, they all come crashing down because the good comes out on the top in the end. It may take time. There'll be a lot of pain and suffering in the meantime, but he who laughs last laughs the longest, I hope. Okay, well, we had a little break there for adjusting the TVs and stuff. Can you tell us what's happening with Mick in England, which I know is a great guy? He's involved with the common law and training peace constables and stuff out there. And are the IRB and you guys in Ireland helping England with this freedom movement?
Yeah, so you're talking about Mick Stott, who is a retired commander of the British Army. And he was involved with us. Well, he came on to help defend everybody at the Trafalgar Square rallies, as did many of the veterans. So I was very honored to go and meet many of the veterans who had, many of them had also been vaccine injured as well. So I went behind the scenes in 2020 just to explain to them about vaccine injury and also to build bonds between the nations. And Mick was also very important to help us in the World Freedom Alliance and the World Doctors Alliance when we founded them. And then Mick went on to set up the Guardians 300. And that was a way of telling people a one-day program where people would meet to learn about their sovereignty and the law, all aspects of the law, which was very useful. And because he also has set up a program around psychology, called Spectrum and other programs, he actually strategically did a train the trainers initiative. And then the Guardians 300 managed to train within 3 months 30,000 people in sovereignty and the law, which is very important. It's just that you would know that no one has the right to interfere with your freedom of travel, freedom of speech, privacy, private property, and that people are accountable, including people that we pay as police and judges. So that's really important. So now it was wonderful as well that in the World Freedom Alliance, of course, one of our main co-founders was Mads Pavik from Denmark, who is leading many of the programs and pushbacks around stopping the injections and many initiatives in Denmark. He is one of the co-founders of World Freedom Alliance and is a former banker. And so one of the things that's interesting about the World Freedom Alliance is that we are more a strategic organization, where many of the co-founders have had multiple roles, including working in the current system, whether it's in the military as medical professionals, as bankers, financial controllers, and people who've studied democracy, or people, democracy and local democracy, and how you actually can elect and have transparency in elections. And then people like me has been involved in science and the law for many years. So what we're doing is strategically linking people around the world. We also know or have exposed or, communicated when the sabotage network have been trying to undermine, we'll say, true freedom defenders. And many of them are exposed now. But we're actually having a meeting in this November 2020 in Greece for a strategic meeting in order to, learn lessons from every continent in the world, and then that nations would help each other in pushing back in all areas, whether it's education, healthcare, the media, the political and electoral system, but most importantly, the banking system and food. So Mick Stott actually is networked with many of the Freedom Defender financial and money system, as am I. And in Ireland in October 2022, we had a strategic meeting of the different financial systems. So we, because we have sovereignty in the nation of Ireland or ERA, and because the Irish Republican Brotherhood has claimed and holds the sovereignty of the nation, including in the proclamation and the flag, we are in a process of restoring sovereignty to the people of the nation. And then we would be able to set up a money and financial system, or at least facilitate it. And while there are like 30, 40 key people, and I'm very honored to be working with them, we now are networked with tens of thousands of people. And every week, almost every week now as well, we have a process where people can claim or proclaim their sovereignty in a sovereign deed around the nation. And it's actually is an amazing movement, really, for people to understand that no one can take away your freedoms. They belong to you from the second that you are conceived to the moment that you pass away.
Fantastic. That's good because Mick Scott, I spoke to Mick on here a couple, I think once or twice, and I've rung. We talk on the phone, and we obviously he talks about you a lot. Mick's a great guy, and there's lots of other great guys and great gals, as they say. And if we could all get all, as we know, all roads lead to Rome, and hence the brick road. Remember that what do you call it, the yellow brick road? If we could all get on the same path. Sadly, there's a lot of, as you said, people who are there to slow us down, and if we could get rid of these galars and get them, well, a galar, that's what we call food. They're
Can I
galars.
just say, Barry, we've actually done it now. So I've been saying all along, we only need 1 in a million people, right? And we don't all need to get together, right? That's part of the infiltrators' language, right? That what, of course, if someone just is, so what we say the art and the language of sabotage is, if someone sabotages by their actions, saying they'll do something and then they leave you down multiple times, or if they're engaged in something like taking cases where they lose repeatedly, setting the wrong precedent, or if they're involved in silencing us or ruining our names or not inviting people to speak, then they, reveal themselves. And then it is not, we do not have to get on with everyone. We have to get on with people who, by their actions, are actually contributing. And the other hallmark of saboteurs is that they only articulate the problem, but there's no solutions. So one of the key, initiatives that we have in the networking is that everyone who is a true freedom fighter actually always has one thing that they're doing, usually, even if it's on their own, no matter if no one else in their nation is doing anything, they will be going out onto a roundabout and holding a sign or writing notices of liability. So there is an actual trait of freedom fighters. So you only need literally 1 in a million. And what is amazing is now, and that was the strategic setup of the World Freedom Alliance, is that we are now connected with key people. But maybe the two things, and what I'm saying maybe is that imagine being like on the Supreme Court in Australia or in Ireland, knowing that historically it will be exposed that there were 12 key people in every nation, like the Supreme Court, that are paid and have sworn an oath to uphold people's inalienable rights to life, right? From the natural law high up in the hierarchy of law. And that if they had done their job, which they have sworn an oath to and are paid, the pregnant women would not have been coerced or lied to or deceived. It's deception and fraud to take these injections. And their unborn babies would be alive, as would all of the thousands of people that not just are experiencing adverse events now, or that their loved ones have died, but because some of the technology in the injections is progressive, that the death toll and the harm will be revealed. But it actually historically lies, the deception, the lies, the fraud, the malfeasance, the contributory manslaughter is resting on the people we pay as police and as judges. So what I say is, can you imagine, them, like how do, sleeping at night, they must be aware. Obviously, they all got notices, they all know that this was the most lethal clinical trial. And I'm sure now they know that their own family members, their own children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, parents, grandparents, neighbors, are all succumbing to the adverse events. And so I think what we have to, why I have essentially huge hope in a generational way is that it already is revealed, the sabotage has been revealed, and the law will be restored, and that they are accountable. And because there was fraud and deception, there is no term limit on the length of time. So that's why we also, in our language, must ensure that they are innocent until proven guilty, and there must be evidence supplied. And of course, what the other thing they did, which is absolutely criminal malfeasance, the second highest crime, lifetime in prison in the United Kingdom, is that they have sworn an oath to defend people's right to life, their inalienable right to life, freedom of travel, freedom of speech, privacy, and private property. So what people need to really see is that what has been targeted in this agenda for this century, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, till 2099, is people's inalienable right to life. So by being coerced into testing and injections, and then their freedom of travel, freedom of speech, their privacy, where they're asking medical information, and private property, that the police have been criminally coming into places without lawful warrants. So the judges, are wrong and the people we pay as police or dress up as police, their only job is to defend those rights and to act in honor, do no harm, and to ensure that people are guilty. And if there is a trial, there is a jury trial. So that's their job. And they haven't been doing it. And instead, they've been passing COVID-19, legislation, but they knew or should have known that that would infringe on people's right to travel, freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And so there is a special crime for those people, just for those professionals who we pay as civil servants, right? These persons. That's called malfeasance. And that's the second highest crime, lifetime in prison in the UK. So imagine being them, and it will be exposed, and they will be held to account. And that is why I have great hope, Barry.
Oh, look, that's fantastic. Well, perhaps we better call an end to it now, because if we go on too long, we'll lose a lot of people. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for coming on tonight, and perhaps we get on soon again and bring on Mick and maybe KT, if she'll be watching this down in Cork, I think, isn't it? She's in Cork.
Anyway, no, she's in Tipperary, so I'm a Tipperary woman.
Sorry,
so that's
KT, you're in Tipperary. Anyway, thanks, Professor Cahill, for coming on to London News, and we'll do all this again soon. Okay, we'll say goodbye to everybody for now.
Thank you very much for having me on, Barry, and I'm looking forward to talking to you soon again. Take care and goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening.